Did everybody out there enjoy your weekend? Did you attend the No Kings protest? Many people pointed out that the No Kings protest was a roaring success because we went to sleep before the protest and there was no king. And the protest succeeded in preventing a king from appearing when we woke up, the next day, Saturday, Sunday, whatever it was. I didn't participate. I was with my family attending birthday parties for my 2.5-year-old. She went to someone else's birthday party. It was such a wonderful weekend. I was out and about, though, in town where I live. And I will say I saw about 12 people, all of them with gray hair, boomers, 1 foot in the grave, actually, many of these people. And they were protesting. They had their signs, no kings. It was a bust, folks. 7 million people were supposed to show up. Maybe a million showed up. Trump won by 77 million votes. And, the reason the left does this, and people are left it's a talking point they were giving them. 7 million people. That's a huge number. Look at the protest for Trump. I told you already how futile it was, right? I mean, Trump won an election. There's no election tomorrow. He's still president. Nothing's going to change. So it was a stupid protest to begin with, but it was, power to the people. Show our, that we don't support this president. But it was a failure because 7 million people didn't, in fact, show up. And I would remind you, this is what the left does because they depend upon optics. They want perception to be reality. So, for example, if you go back in time, remember the Canadian trucker protesting the COVID mandates over there? That was actually a massive protest. That was a massive protest. And what did the left say? Oh, it's tiny, it's small. They downplayed it. They did the opposite. They told the 7 million people showed up for the No Kings protest on Saturday when it was maybe a million. I saw other estimates at 650,000, but whatever, a million people, 1.5 million, whatever you want to call it. It wasn't 7 million, much smaller number, a failure. So they pump that up to try and convince you that it's a big popular movement. And then when you have a real popular movement that is, led and run by people on the right, conservatives, they downplay the numbers because, the only way the left and the authoritarians, the real authoritarians, can actually succeed is by getting you to just stop, you to give up, because they are in disarray. They're a disaster. They are not ascendant. The Democrat Party, in fact, has 1 foot in the grave, and they know it, and you know it, but they want to convince you that that's not reality, when in fact it is. Welcome to the Drew Show, everybody. This is Drew, your millennial minister of truth. Many things to get into today. I want to talk about some the latest Politico hit job. Politico is now, it's always been, but they have clearly been tasked with the objective of trying to create a false moral equivalence between people on the so-called right and people on the left who assassinate Charlie Kirk and try to assassinate President Trump and try to kill other conservatives. They want to create this false equivalence to distract from the reality that the left is, in fact, an existential threat to this country and your freedom and our liberty, and on and on. So before I came on here, I saw this piece from Politico. Paul Ingrassia, he's Donald Trump's nominee to lead the Office of Special Counsel. Well, he had some text exchanges, another group text chat, and he made fun of Martin Luther King Jr. He said that the holidays should be tossed into the seventh circle of hell, and he said, jokingly, that he has a Nazi streak. And this is according to the text chat that Politico released. And so, Ingrassia has a Senate confirmation hearing scheduled on Thursday. And I'm going to make the case and explain to you exactly why I don't care. As a matter of fact, because Politico released this, the Republicans have a double obligation to go ahead and confirm Paul Ingrassia. And I want to explain something to you. So what's happening now? I mean, what's blowing first off, be careful who your friends are. Because obviously people are trying to work against the Trump administration. This really isn't about Paul Ingrassia, right? You understand this isn't about Paul Ingrassia. This is actually about opposition to Trump. This is about creating a counter narrative to distract from. Look, Charlie Kirk was murdered a month ago. And Democrats obviously want to move on from that. And so this is the tactic. And look, this is coming from Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals. Saul Alinsky was, the OG, um, uh, community organizer, right? He was idolized by the likes of Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama. This is a Marxist revolutionary of the left who wrote a book giving them tactics, trying to tell them how to bring about Marxist revolution in America, to overthrow the greatest country in the history of the world and replace it with a hellhole. And Alinsky, one of the tactics is that he enlists the leftist activists to commit themselves to is make the enemy live up to its own rules. So obviously all of this stems from the fact that, the Democrats are very, very hurt by the release of the Jay Jones text messages. Jay Jones being the Democrat who's running for attorney general in Virginia. Now, Jay Jones didn't say, kind of risque things in a text message. He openly advocated for the murder of his political opponent. He talked about putting bullets in his opponent and his opponent's children. And he talked about how he would piss on their grave effectively. Saying that is a very different thing from making jokes and text messages. And before some of the holier than thou people out there try and pretend that, you've never said anything, basically, I'm just gonna say it. I guess I'll just put words in your mouth for the first time. I don't like to do this, but I'm going to do it. Not to all of you, but there's some people out there that just don't get it. They want to pretend that they are above and more moral than other people when it comes to these text messages and things like that. If you go through people's X feeds, let me put it this way. Do you ever have thoughts that you wouldn't go out and articulate to people? I'm talking about your thoughts, your private thoughts. Everyone understands that these text messages with groups and things like that, they effectively are an extension of those thoughts in many cases. And I'll be perfectly honest with you. So I don't espouse cursing. I try not to use bad language, coarse language. I don't like it. It's not the end of the world. But, a relative once told me, cursing is the sign of profanity is a sign of a weak mind trying to express itself forcefully. And that's true. You a lot of times you can use curse words and they, omit the need for certain arguments and things like that. But there are certain people I text with where I will type certain profanity, kind of in a joking manner, kind of in a freeing manner, because I wouldn't actually do that in my public life or even with my friends in person. So there's a way I will text people sometimes that isn't indicative of who I am or what I believe. And of course, there are jokes and things like that too. But really, all of this is unnecessary to even point out, because I refuse to bend the knee to the left's Marxist tactic. So now they're getting all these private messages, and it's never going to stop. This is it. They're, whether they're leaked or however they obtain these things, they're going to try and hold, every person on the right. And by the way, no one can meet the moral standard that the left is trying to hold the right to. And the point is the left has no moral standards whatsoever. None whatsoever. So you're dealing with an enemy. It's like going to the jungles of Vietnam or going to the Middle East. And you want to fight a war with conventional tactics. And the left, like the Taliban, like the Congos in Vietnam, they understand that they don't have to use those rules of engagement. And so they use them against you. And so from a perspective of saving the country, with a perspective of what the left is comprised of and what they're trying to do tactically, I don't care. I don't care. And objectively, there is no equivalence between private text messages that have jokes or other things, even talking about Martin Luther King Jr., and the public messaging of Democrats that celebrates the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Let me just give you one example. I didn't actually plan to start the show this way, but every time I come on, something, pops up. It's the news. It's always happening. So it's important to me and I want to incorporate it. So here's a protester at the No Kings protest. Listen to this gray-haired lady and the way she speaks publicly on camera. This isn't in a private text. This is public.
Recently, with Charlie Kirk being assassinated,
Kirk is a piece of garbage. Of course we were mean. I am so tired of people saying, oh, but, it's a terrible thing. No, Hitler is dead. I'm glad Hitler's dead.
Something that I've heard in interviewing Republicans is that they're concerned with the health care going to undocumented immigrants. What would you say about that?
I don't know that it's true. Everybody deserves health care, and we can certainly afford it in this country. So again, they're just, they're pointing to things and saying it's our fault, we're too liberal.
Not many brain cells in that individual, but the main thing to point out is what she starts with. I'm glad Charlie Kirk's dead. I'm glad Hitler is dead. So there is a big difference in celebrating someone's death, endorsing their murder and assassination as a good thing in this country, and somebody in a private text message, using a racist remark or something like that with, friends or a group. So, again, I'm standing firm on this. Now, look, I would absolutely, and I say this unequivocally, I would draw a line if these text messages or anything that, the left could dig up from someone on the right, if they spoke about assassinating, killing, harming the children or the family of anybody on the right, no matter how vile I think they are, then I would absolutely condemn it in the strongest terms. But that's not what's happening here. And so what they want to do is not have a conversation about the left's political violence problem and instead focus on private text messages of Republicans that they can pull out of context or whatever else. So I'm not going to do it. And by the way, Martin Luther King Jr., this is one of those things they attacked Charlie Kirk on. I do believe that MLK Jr. Had a positive impact on this country in many ways. Now, the problem is this is like the Civil Rights Act. Now, the Republicans, let's not get into revisionist history here. The Republicans tried to pass civil rights legislation for 20 plus years, and the Democrats always stopped it. The Republicans tried, for example, to make it illegal to, hang blacks by their necks, aka lynching. And the Democrats opposed even that legislation. But the Democrats got a little savvier. And by the time LBJ became president, LBJ famously said, I'll have those N-words voting Democrat for the next X amount of years, 100 years or whatever it was. And it required, the Democrats had a supermajority in the Congress when LBJ tried to pass civil rights legislation, the first act of 1964. And he couldn't pass it even with a supermajority. That means the Democrats didn't require a single Republican vote to pass civil rights legislation. They had all the votes they needed. But Republicans came to the rescue and ensured that it passed. And so this myth of the switch, the myth of the big switch, where Democrats, became the, party of anti-racism, and the Republicans suddenly adopted the Democrats' posture for their entire history and became the party of anti-black racists. It never happened. It never happened. And in fact, the civil rights legislation gave way to affirmative action. And this is the point Charlie Kirk often made, that went too far. Went too far. It actually assailed the highest ideals of America by incorporating in our laws up until today that the opposite of what Martin Luther King Jr. preached, by the way, which was that, a man shouldn't be judged by the color of his skin, but by his character. And of course, affirmative action is the opposite of that. It's very harmful and it creates victims by default. So Martin Luther King Jr., obviously he is celebrated as a hero. Now, he's not exactly George Floyd, obviously. But, you know, Martin Luther King Jr., you know, you know, we're all sinners, but Martin Luther King Jr., he had countless extramarital affairs. His closest associates admitted it, and he plagiarized portions of his doctoral dissertation. And that's the record. That's the record. So that's who Martin Luther King Jr. does. Now, does that take away from what he did or what he's remembered for? You can decide that if you want. I've told you, I think that his ultimate message, the one he's most famous for, I think is a net positive for America. But you can have a conversation about Martin Luther King Jr.'s private life and who he was. So if the left wants to sit here and attack, you know, Paul Ingrassia for criticism of MLK Jr. based on the very personal character flaws that I'm talking about, well, Paul Ingrassia is perfectly capable of doing good as well in his position, despite some of his personal character flaws. You see how this works? Good. Good. I just want to. Well, I don't think we need to talk about the No Kings protest much anymore. I mean, you know, it was stupid. It didn't have a great showing. It was mostly old people, as I told you. And you know, the main takeaway from that is how the left wants to insist on this narrative that it was such a big deal. That it's so, because, you know, they want you to believe this critical moment that Trump is now unpopular, because they want you to stop supporting Trump. They want you, I mean, you know, they're looking at midterms, they're looking at things like that. They need to stop Trump. I do want to play another clip from the No Kings protest. So while we're focused on Paul Ingrassia, you know, this guy can't be confirmed or whatever else, listen to the Party of Tolerance over the weekend.
You gotta grab a gun. We gotta turn around the guns on this fascist system. These ICE agents gotta get shot and wiped out. This state, the state machinery that's a full.
Sounds like a candidate for deportation to me. I detect an accent. Check his papers. But you hear that guy, right? He calls for people to pick up their guns and turn them on ice. That is a call for violence. This guy should be arrested. If he is a naturalized citizen, he should be denaturalized and deported. We can't tolerate that in this country. But this is the party. So we're being told all of these, all this BS, all this gaslighting about the right and what we are and whatever else. And meanwhile, this is happening at protests. And by the way, what that guy just did there is worse than 99% of the J6 protesters who committed misdemeanor offenses, you know, walking peacefully through the open doors of the building, Capitol building. This guy's calling for the murder of ICE in public. I want to play this clip of CNN because I want to reinforce for you and help you understand that both everything the Democrats are doing right now, right? All of their desperate efforts to fight back because they can't accept the election results, they're in vain. The Democrat Party is historically unpopular. Democrats have admitted it. They know it. That's why they're reducing themselves to these pathetic tactics and text message leaks and so on and so forth. But the shutdown is not a winning issue for the Democrat Party. It's not. Their opposition to, you know, ICE raids and deportations are not the popular opinion. A majority of Americans support that too. And listen to this from CNN.
About Donald Trump shutdowns, net approval rating, we're talking 20 days into it. In 2018/2019, Donald Trump's net approval rating was already falling. The shutdown was eating into his popular support. It was down 3 points already at this particular point and would fall considerably more. It was very much on the decline. You come over to this side of the screen, this shutdown hasn't eaten into Donald Trump's support at all. His net approval rating is actually up a point. And in terms of his popular support. So the bottom line is this: the first shutdown during Trump's first term, 2018, 2019, was hurting Donald Trump. This one is not hurting him at all. There's no real reason Donald Trump might say, at least when it comes to popular support, I want to get out of this shutdown.
What about the question of blame?
Yeah, okay. What about the question of blame? Okay, you see here, you see Donald Trump's net approval rating was down 2018 to 2019. You talk about 2025 as net approval rating is up. It comes down to the blame game, a game I loved to play when I was younger. Blame Trump for the shutdown, a great deal. In 2018/2019, 61%, more than 3 in 5 Americans blame Trump, a great deal for that particular shutdown.
Wow. So 61% blame Trump for the shutdown back in 2018-19, and now 48%. So less than half of the population in the country blames Trump. And that's because the American population is done with the Democrat games. We have wised up. People have gotten themselves educated and informed. They are mostly off of the Democrat plantation right now and can think for themselves. And that's what I always encourage you to do on this show. This show is about encouraging you and inspiring you to do your research, to think critically for yourselves. Do not be told what to believe by anyone else. And it's obvious that this is a Democrat Party shutdown. The Democrat Party continues to vote against Republican efforts to open the country back up, to open up, the government, not the country. We're still thriving here in the private sector. But the government is shut down. And, my heart is, I do feel for some of these government employees, people in the military in particular. I mean, they got a paycheck this last week or whenever it was, because Hegseth and others found the money and were able to move it around to pay people. But that's not going to continue. So, paychecks are going to be missed soon. Now, the Republicans do not have a majority, a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. So anyone with a basic civics education knows that the Republicans need the Democrats to vote to open the government. And the Democrats refuse to do it. And the Republicans didn't even try and do anything tricky. This continuing resolution was clean, was a clean bill. One that Democrats have supported, I think, 12 or 13 times over the past number of years. So it's never been a problem. But now, because they have Trump derangement syndrome, they insist on opposing Trump. I mean, the minority party is demanding a bunch of things in this bill, and that's not how it works. And the Republicans who have a majority, not filibuster proof, but who have a majority, who have a clear mandate from the American people, they didn't even try and push through any of their, quote unquote, our quote unquote goodies in this continuing resolution. And so anybody with a brain understands that this is a Democrat shutdown, because the Republicans keep holding votes to open the government and the Democrats keep voting to keep it closed. So it's not working anymore. I do want to talk about the left's reaction to this Donald Trump's expansion of the White House, this ballroom edition, in just a moment. But first, ask yourself, what if the next big crash is already in motion and almost no one sees it coming? Every major economic collapse since 1929 was preceded by the same 7 warning signals. And right now, all 7 are flashing red at the same time. These aren't headlines. They're deep market indicators that Wall Street prefers you never hear about. And that's why our friends at American Alternative Assets created the Bellwether Signal, a free report that reveals what these signals mean and how smart Americans are protecting their savings with gold and silver before it's too late. You can download your free copy right now at cloutgold.com, or you can call them at 855-803-GOLD. 855-803-GOLD. Again, that's cloutgold.com or 855-803-4653. Get the facts, protect your future. Don't wait for the headlines to catch up. What are your feelings out there about Mamdani? You think Mamdani is going to be the mayor of New York City? It's looking like it. I was on a radio show this morning just before I came on my own show, The Drew Allen Show. And we were talking about Mamdani. They asked me about Mamdani. And, there's news that I mean, you know, Mamdani's kind of Obama 2.0, except he's like a legit Muslim. Um, but there's a terror-linked Brooklyn imam, and he just recently was seen palling around with the socialist New York City mayoral candidate Zohran Mamdani. And this imam once urged jihad on the Big Apple. His name is Imam Siraj Wahhaj, one of the nation's foremost Muslim leaders. And in the early 2000s, he delivered a sermon telling followers to participate in gun-free jihad and march through the city of New York. I pray one day, he said, Allah will bless us to raise an army. And I'm serious about this, he said during the sermon. We were very close recently. We had made intention to raise an army of 10,000 men in New York City. He tells Muslim men further, go fight in the way of Subhanahu wa ta'ala. Added the Imam. Glory be to Allah. 800,000 Muslims in New York City, he said. Can you imagine if 800,000 Muslims decide to march every day? Now, there's more, he says. But this man has no place in America. He sides with the terrorists. He views himself as an insurrectionist. And this is one of Mamdani's buddies. And my friends on the Vic Porcelli radio show are asking me, like, how many New Yorkers do you think know about this because of the media? And I said, let me ask you another question that's scarier. How many New Yorkers do you think would care? And that's the question. And so, you know, the even Republican that saw the New York Post editorial board was calling for Sliwa, no, he's not an imam, but Curtis Sliwa, I think that's how you pronounce his name. He's running as a Republican candidate in New York City. They're calling on him to get out of the race because then it would be between Andrew Cuomo and Mamdani. And I guess they're hoping that, you know, Cuomo, who murdered a bunch of, old people in nursing homes by sending COVID-infected patients in there, now suddenly he is desired in New York City. Folks, I can't tell you just how poisonous the Democrat Party ideology is. If you can just look at these markers and see how rapidly this poison has infected and spread like a cancer in this country. I'm not even talking about going back to 2016. I mean, it's getting more and more rapid. 2016 was a big moment. That's when Barack Hussein Obama, America's first Muslim president, that's when he gave a green light for an actual coup to undermine the will of the American people. That's when he told the intelligence community with the drafting of the ICA with John Brennan, he commanded them to label Donald Trump, Putin's puppet after he was elected, but before he was inaugurated, so that they could then investigate him and paint him as such when they knew there was no evidence to support it. And, by 2020, after 4 years of, Trump is Hitler and the COVID scam and all that sort of stuff, that's when Democrats began to peel off and cancel Republicans from their lives. It happened to me. It happened to many people I talked to. That was a big shift, a big scary moment in American history where people that you were friends with in the past who overlooked political differences then could no longer do it. They could no longer live and tolerate you as a friend because you supported Trump. And now we get to this point where Mamdani, who is an avowed, self-declared socialist, who is a friend of an imam who called for jihad in New York City in the early 2000s. This is a friend of terrorists, radical Islamist terrorist. Mamdani is friends with a radical Islamist terrorist in New York City, which experienced the greatest domestic act of terrorism in our history on 9/11. And this guy is poised to become the mayor of New York City. Now, one of the things I pointed out on numerous occasions, even just hoping I could get, just talk to a liberal out there, somebody in New York City who would actually consider supporting Mamdani. It's this. Mamdani is in his early 30s. I think that's it. That's the oldest he is. He's in his early 30s. And he's never had a legitimate job in his life. He's never run anything. He's never built anything. He's just a radical ideologue. He's a socialist. New York City, of course, is the biggest city in America. It's one of the most important cities in the world. You would not hire Mamdani to be CEO of any company in America because he doesn't have the experience or the acumen. He doesn't have the resume. And I just scratch my head and I think, okay, New York City is the most important city in the world. If I lived in New York City, obviously the policies that are enacted by these mayors are very important to my personal life and my future. Why would I vote for someone who has no experience running anything to run the biggest city in America? How does he have qualifications to do that? And of course, politics is the one sphere where that doesn't matter. But you're seeing why Trump is successful in contrast to Barack Obama, who was successful in another way, successful at destroying the country, because Barack Hussein Obama surrounded himself by radical ideologues that agreed with him. And they carried out the marching orders. But Donald Trump has that experience. He has run companies. Oh, he's been bankrupt, blah, blah, blah. He's a multi-billionaire. He's tried, he's succeeded, he's failed, and he's succeeded wildly, which is the story of all great American entrepreneurs. And so you're seeing that competency now in the government. Now, what we saw last time with Donald Trump was a shortcoming, right? Because working in the private sector is radically different from working in the government. And Donald Trump, having no political experience in the past, did not have people that he could trust, that he'd worked with around him to bring into the White House. And so the last time we had an issue because he didn't have government people around him that were good people. And this time he has surrounded himself with very, very capable cabinet selections and so on and so forth. Now, nobody's perfect. That's not what I ever try to argue on this case. In this case with anything, but that's the point. But anyway, so Mamdani, he campaigned on Friday with this imam. And by the way, he's a notorious gay-hating imam. He's an unindicted co-conspirator in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing and has been linked to other terrorist activities in the United States. Now, so can I just reiterate something? So how did I start this show? I talked about this Politico hit job, right? First, Politico last week comes out with text messages of leaders of the young Republicans, most of them in their 20s. And they had colorful exchanges and said things that you wouldn't want aired out in public, but they didn't call for anybody to be killed. They had conversations that maybe many of you wouldn't have, but they're not completely... They're not as outrageous as Politico wants you to think because you're talking about young kids. So anyway, I don't need to sit here. It's not about defending. I don't talk like that in text messages. But my point is you need to have perspective and you need to understand what is at stake. So you've got Democrats who want to use this Marxist Saul Alinsky tactic, make the enemy live up to its own rules. So you've got Paul Ingrassia, who is supposed to be, confirmed in the Senate, or at least the hearing is supposed to happen on Thursday for the Office of Special Counsel. And Politico obtained leaked text messages from Paul Ingrassia that really don't say anything horrendous at all. This guy, okay? And now you've got Mamdani, who on Friday, who was actually seen smiling and palling around with a radical imam, a Muslim co-conspirator in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, who's anti-gay. And I'm supposed to be upset about Paul Ingrassia and focus my attention on Paul Ingrassia, not Mamdani, who is poised to become the mayor of New York City and bring about unprecedented carnage on the streets. Do you understand how your brain must deal with these two things and understand what the tactics here are by the left? So I'm supposed to sit here and condemn Paul Ingrassia. I'm supposed to sit here and buy the left's false narrative that Republicans are racist, Republicans are bigots, Republicans are horrible people, when the Democrats are out there in No Kings protests calling for people to pick up guns and kill ICE agents, when other gray-haired blue hairs, as they're called in history, the blue hairs who have gray hair, are out there celebrating Charlie Kirk's murder, saying, it's ridiculous that we should be upset. I'm glad Hitler's dead, in reference to Charlie Kirk. And you got Mamdani with an anti-gay a Muslim imam who's linked to terrorist activity in America. But Politico releases the text messages of Paul Ingrassia, and I'm supposed to be concerned about that. Go screw yourself. Only somebody with no brain cells left to run together would buy that crap from Politico, would bend the knee because a bunch of morons on the left demand that you condemn all these things as if they have any moral ground to stand on whatsoever. They have no moral ground to stand on. The left does not have they don't stand on moral ground. They're on, standing on a graveyard of corruption, of treason, of amorality. The party of transgenderism that wants your 8-year-old to be indoctrinated to cut off his penis or have a double mastectomy. That party can just stay silent. I care nothing about what the left says. What they say, what Politico writes, what they pump through the echo chamber on social media has zero effect on me whatsoever. I base none of my decisions, none of my opinions on what the left is saying. Charlie Kirk murderers, Donald Trump assassins, pound sand. Okay, I do want to talk about the White House. This will be a fun segment. I want to give you some history. I love history. I want to talk about the history of the White House, and I'm going to do that in just a minute so we can be uninterrupted for the rest of the show. But first, are you ready to move easily and independently without pain or stiffness holding you back? Do you look in the mirror and see a plump, hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Discover Native Path Collagen. Made with only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers, the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen in your body. Collagen, of course, is found in your bones, in your cartilage, in your skin, your hair, your nails. It's found in your gut. And types 1 and 3 provide maximum benefits without the need for unnecessary fillers. So Native Path Collagen, it's a single ingredient formula. You've heard me talk about this on the show many times. It doesn't have fillers, doesn't have additives, artificial sweeteners. It's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. It's completely flavorless. It's it has a peptide formula, which makes it more bioavailable. That means it just doesn't clump. So you can put in your oatmeal, your coffee, your smoothies. It's flavorless, as I said. It doesn't clump. And it's just, the company's booming. 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, 8,000 5-star reviews. And you can visit getnativepath.com/dailyclout. Again, that's getnativepath.com/dailyclout and start your transformation today. So look, I've got some, if you're watching on the live Rumble show or Rumble later, I've got some images I want to show you of the White House. So that'll be kind of entertaining. If you're just listening, I'll describe them to you. And, the Get Native Path reminding me of something. If you haven't, and you're willing to, I would appreciate it. Take the time to, look, every show, it's beneficial if you like the episode, or certainly if you listen on Spotify or Apple, to go on and give it a 5-star review. So I never asked for that. I forget to, but I have been intending to. So, if you like the show today, I would appreciate it if you would take the time to do that. All right, so let's talk about the White House history, because have you seen the reactions from the left? So, firstly, the left, as usual, they don't have two brain cells to rub together. It's all groupthink. So, everything I've seen on social media is a picture of the demolition right now that is necessary, right, to add on and have construction. And they're saying that, oh, this is an image of what Trump's doing to America. Now, they, of course, are acting like there's no historic precedent for this. It's so amazing to me. So what Donald Trump is doing is he's adding a larger space onto the White House. And it's going to be a ballroom that's intended to host important state functions, state guests, people from other countries, world leaders. And right now, it's a very small space, and they actually aren't even able to host everyone in there. They have to put it up under a tent adjacent to the White House. So it's 2025, and the needs have outgrown the space available. And the White House, people get, the White House is our house. Yeah, it is our house. Is our house. But, we're not the real estate agents, and, it's the president and the administration that's in there that gets to make some of these adjustments, and they're not new at all. So this is just another example of Trump derangement syndrome, the left's outrage because they just have to be mad about something all the time, everything. So, first off, the White House is not Versailles. The White House is not some museum. The White House, thank God, is a living chronicle of America, because we still continue to be the longest running democracy in the world, uninterrupted. And so it's not a relic to be preserved. It is a living place that is occupied and used by the President of the United States and his administration. And so, of course, it must be altered over the years. So, so this is great. So this is the, and then I'll get into Karine Jean-Pierre in just a minute, because that's amazing. So here's actually the earliest image of the White House. This is from 1846. So this is actually what you're looking at is the second White House. Now it's very similar to the one that we're familiar with, on the outside at least. But that's from 1846. Now, George Washington started building the White House in the early 1790s, 1792, and it was not completed until 1800. And then, the first White House was burned to the ground by the British by way of Canada in 1814. So the first White House was burnt to the ground, had to be rebuilt. Theodore Roosevelt, added the West Wing as we know it today. Harry Truman gutted the entire White House because it was falling apart, amongst other reasons, and rebuilt it. I want to give you a picture of this. So the left is out there trying to use a picture of Donald Trump and some demolition happening to build a better, improved space, ballroom at the White House. Here's an image of the interior of the White House under President Truman. Totally gutted. Totally gutted. So are they outraged about Donald Truman and what he did to the White House too? No. Now, I mean, the White House looked a disaster back in the 1920s because, and after, if you think about it, every administration comes in and changes are made. And so you're living through different architectural eras as well. So you have the Victorian era, for example, and you have these bizarre things. And at the end of the day, it's like, I don't know what I'm trying to use as an analogy, but some house that doesn't have any, it's an incoherent space. But anyway, so, you've got Teddy Roosevelt, who added the West Wing that got the offices out of the main residence. You had President Taft. He created the Oval Office, by the way. FDR added a press briefing room. He added a bunker below the White House as well because it was World War II. You have the Truman balcony, which is so synonymous now with the White House, where everyone stands and waves and whatever else. That was added, and it was controversial at the time that he was building it. Obama added tennis and basketball courts. Ooh. So anyway, it really is infuriating to me the way the left just shows its incapacity, inability to think critically. Everything Trump does is just has to be, denounced. By the way, here's an image from No Kings, I believe, too. The Denver Communists had a table set up. It says Charlie Kirk had it coming. Will Democrats condemn this? Will Mamdani condemn it? I demand that Democrats condemn everything that I show them about their own ilk. Their own ilk. Okay. So Karine Jean-Pierre, Karine Jean-Pierre is really railing against the Democrat Party, but it's not for what you'd think. Karine Jean-Pierre is actually upset. She calls herself an independent. She's upset because of how Democrats treated Biden. Can you believe it? That's what she's upset about. And this is, by the way, Democrats, this is your problem. This is one of many problems, but this is the primary reason that you have one foot in the grave as a party right now. It's because you doubled down on your lies. You refuse to ever acknowledge any mistake you've ever made. You refuse to ever tell the truth or reverse course, even when it's undeniable and unignorable that you've been lying to the American people. You show no ability to acknowledge error and fault. Here's a first clip.
And right now, in this moment, there's an existential threat. Our democracy is hanging by a thread. Some people would say we're already an authoritarian regime. And I need to see teeth. I need to see fire. And not just me. Many people are worried and concerned.
She needs to see teeth. I think you showed your teeth last month on the 10th when one of your indoctrinated leftists put a bullet in Charlie Kirk's neck. Is that the kind of teeth you're talking about, Karine? Or how about the sniper's nest that the Secret Service just discovered near Mar-a-Lago that was set up to assassinate Trump again for the third attempt? Here's another one of Karine Jean-Pierre.
I was saying, because I too thought that. And people said, why didn't members of his inner circle speak up about what many believe was the apparent decline of Joe Biden? You said, you're a member of the inner circle and you never saw the decline. And after that, I wrote, how? Yeah. You even write, Karine, that you were on the plane with him going to the debate and you didn't see anything.
Well, when we were on the Air Force One going to the debate, you got to remember his campaign people were on the team, his family was on the team. I actually was one of those rare trips that I didn't really see him until after the debate, even though I was on the plane. So really, I want everybody to know that I take this question.
I'm just going to stop there for a second. So listen to the way these professional liars lie. So she doubles down. She will double down and say that there was no issue. She didn't ever notice any problems with Joe Biden's mental acuity. So she continues to say that. And yet when asked about the time on the plane before the debate, in which other people are saying they noticed it, she said, well, I wasn't on the plane. So which is it? So are you acknowledging now that there was a problem with his mental acuity and you just didn't see it on the plane ride? But that was the only occasion where it could have been seen because you also say you were around him all the time. You are one of his close advisors. You are one of the people in his inner circle, and you never saw a problem with his brain. And yet when asked about the plane trip to the debate where his whole campaign blew up, well, I wasn't there. I didn't see that episode. These people think that if you support these people, they think you are retarded. That's what they think. That's what they think. So anyway, that's Karine Jean-Pierre. She's out there trying to sell her new book, hawking her new book. She says in the book, Biden seemed to be totally at peace with his decision, but I was stunned. My feelings a blur. I was angry and sad. I was enraged and heartbroken that this man had given more than 50 years of his life to serving the American people. And in the end, he'd been treated poorly by members of his own party. It was horrible, Jean-Pierre wrote. 50 years of his life serving the American people. No, 50 years of his life serving himself and his family through corruption. That's what he did. I just got to decide here. We got a few minutes left here to talk. I think I've got to address the ceasefire in between Hamas and Israel. So here's an exchange. So the ceasefire, it's holding as of now, but Hamas has already violated it and broken it. But I want you to hear Donald Trump addressing what's going on.
Mr. President, you just alluded to the violence in the Middle East. What steps is the administration taking to maintain the ceasefire?
Well, a lot of steps, and right now it's in the hands of others. You know, we have 59 countries that agreed to the deal. We have a peace in the Middle East for the first time ever. We made a deal with Hamas that, you know, they're going to be very good, they're going to behave, they're going to be nice, and if they're not, we're going to go and we're going to eradicate them if we have to. They'll be eradicated, and they know that. So they went in. They went in, and I don't believe it was the leadership, but they had some rebellion in there among themselves, and they killed.
So what's about to happen is that the people who've been radicalized by the anti-Semitic wing of the United States media, including podcast hosts like Candace Owens, are about to see the truth exposed. Now, again, I will say, I think it's perfectly reasonable to be upset by the death toll in Gaza. I think it's totally appropriate for people to offer sharp criticism of Israel, even in the destruction that took place in the wake of it. But again, Israel did not start it. I want to tell you what Hamas has been up to. And this is the thing, you know, when you understand the history and what's really going on around there, the radical anti-Israel groups, they fundamentally depend upon their supporters to adopt the belief that Israel is somehow worse than radical jihadists and terrorists like Hamas. And so if you maintain rationality and you maintain free thought and you keep your wits about you, when you consider that you're comparing Israel to Hamas, Israel can never be worse than Hamas. That's just the reality. Their actions pale in comparison to those of their terrorist neighbors throughout history. And again, it is Hamas and their Islamic neighbors that for decades and decades since their creation have called for, well, from the river to the sea, they have actively called for the genocide of Jews in Israel. And so to somehow try and create, again, a equivalence between Israel and that can't be done, because it depends upon claiming that Hamas is morally superior to Israel. But, you know, days after the Gaza ceasefire was set up, Hamas made it clear they had no intention of disarming or giving up power. And they didn't return the bodies of all the hostages it had murdered. That was the first thing it violated. That was a key piece of the peace plan. That was actually the very first step. They didn't do it. Less than a week after the release of the last living hostages, Hamas fighters outside Rafah, they fired on Israeli soldiers across the Yellow Line, which marks the portion of Gaza under military control. They killed 2 people. And Israel responded by targeting Hamas tunnel systems and briefly closing border crossings into Gaza. What's amazing about this to me is that the pro-Palestine crowd, right? And they're showing their true colors to me right now, because they're actually cheering the end of this ceasefire because they don't want peace. That's not their objective. They actually want this to continue. They want Israel to be destroyed. both in the realm of perception and physically. So in the next phase of the peace plan, Hamas's combatants, they're supposed to lay down their arms, right? They're supposed to exit Gaza, and that isn't happening and hasn't happened and probably won't happen. We had images of Hamas terrorists publicly executing local Palestinian collaborators, and they put that out on purpose because the brutal Islamists, they staged that savagery. They wanted people to see it inside as well as outside Gaza to know they mean business. Anyone who accepted food aid outside of Hamas-approved channels counts as a collaborator. So if you don't get your food from Hamas, they can kill you, and they will kill you. Hamas reopened detention and interrogation facilities at Al-Shifa and other Gaza hospitals. Once again, using the hospitals as cover. So, maybe it's not black and white for many people, but it's certainly not black and white in the sense that Israel's the bad guys and Hamas is the good guys. I can tell you that right now. And so if you're going to be critical of Israel, you better be critical of Hamas as well. But you're going to see the true colors and why this peace can never happen, because Hamas runs Gaza, runs quote unquote Palestine. And by the way, where is Macron? Where are these other world leaders who are calling for the creation of a Palestinian state after this? Hamas refuses to leave. You cannot have a Palestinian state, and I oppose one, period, because I am a realist. But you certainly can't have a Palestinian state that is run by Hamas. That's the problem. And Hamas is unwilling to give up power. So, it is Israeli hatred in the end. And they're like I said, there are criticisms you can make of Israel. When you're talking about this issue right here, you are absolutely, I'm sorry, you're fundamentally wrong. And you've been lied to and you've been misled if your belief is Israel are the bad guys here and Hamas and the Palestinians, they're the victims. It's just not true. Just not true. I had one more thing I wanted to finish on, I think. I'm trying to find it here. Well, just to close out, Trump was asked by a reporter too about Ukraine. And I just want to play this clip and then comment on it real quick.
You support Senator Lindsey Graham's bill to declare Russia a terrorist state. And you have within your power, you're the most powerful man on earth. Why don't you just enable Ukraine to finish this war tomorrow?
Well, if you knew anything about what you were talking about, you'd be able. You do. I don't think you do, really. I don't think you do because it's a little more complicated.
Yeah, so why don't you just end the Ukraine, Russia war? I don't have time to get into it fully right now. We'll talk about it again. I have talked about it a lot on previous episodes, especially when it was hot under the Biden administration. But Ukraine can't win in a war against Russia. I don't want to be involved in Ukraine. I don't care about Ukraine in the sense that, it's like, Texas or some other U.S. state. Peace needs to be achieved there. And we are not going to fight the war for the Ukrainians. We're not going to put boots on the ground. Now, this is what happens throughout history. You're a weaker nation. Now, there are other, really the West is at fault for what happened here, to be honest, because we have intervened time and time again over the years to force Ukraine to completely abandon Moscow. You have to understand a history of Ukraine, a history of their relationship with the Soviet Union in the past, how many Ukrainians are sympathetic to Moscow and Russia, and they are neighbors. And so we've meddled there for too long. Now, what Russia did is absolutely wrong, but I'm also a realist. So what Russia wants is the Donbass region in the eastern portion of Ukraine. They've long wanted that. Right now, they have about 80% of the territory. And Zelensky refuses. He has no bargaining chips except for us helping him. But he refuses to give up any land to Russia. And that's a non-starter. That's a non-starter. He's going to have to concede land to Russia. Sorry, you're Ukraine. You're weak. Russia's stronger. So peace is the objective, and concessions will have to be made. And some land will have to be conceded. And Zelensky needs to understand that. We're not going to sit here and fund you forever. We're not going to fund you anymore. We're certainly not going to put troops on the ground and fight Russia and go to war with Russia over the Donbass region. So we're willing to make this as painless as possible. You know, we have mineral rights there now. We have a reason to be involved in Ukraine that should strike fear in the hearts of your enemies a little bit now because we have skin in the game. But, you know, that's just not how negotiations work. That's not how the real world works. So anyway, and that's why Trump is different than other people, because he understands deals. He understands real world. All right, this is Drew Allen. Thank you for being with me today. God bless you all. And until next time.